The dress was too clean for what was about to happen. Bridget O'Connor, Bertie. They'd called her since she was small enough to perch on her father's knee in County Cork. Stood in the dim interior of the sod house while her Aunt Margaret fastened the buttons up her back. The dress was Margaret's own Sunday best, dark green wool that smelled of cedar and mothballs, and it hung loose on Bertie's thin frame. "Hold still," Margaret said, her voice tight. Her fingers trembled against the fabric. Bertie held still. She'd learned, in the 5 years since she'd arrived in Montana Territory, that stillness was survival, that silence bought you a few more moments before the next indignity, that if you made yourself small enough, sometimes they forgot you were there. But today, they were not forgetting. Today, she was the entire point. Through the single oil paper window, she could see her Uncle Thomas hitching the mule to the wagon. His movements were jerky, agitated, the movements of a man who'd made a choice he couldn't unmake and was trying not to think about what it meant. Bertie was 15 years old, and she understood exactly what it meant. "There now," Margaret said, stepping back. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She'd done her crying yesterday, in the corner of the soddy where she thought no one could hear. Bertie had heard. You look fine. Fine. Like a horse at auction. Like a bolt of cloth at the mercantile. Like property. The memories came whether she wanted them or not. Ireland, before the hunger. Her mother's laugh. Her father's rough hands, gentle when he braided her red hair. The tiny cottage that had seemed like a castle because love had lived in it. Then the blight, the smell of rotting potatoes. Her mother's hollow eyes. Her father's coffin, and then her mother's, buried in ground too hard and cold to dig properly. She'd been 10 years old when Uncle Thomas had appeared. Her father's brother, who'd gone to America years before and made his fortune, or so the letters said. He'd take her to Montana, he promised. Give her a home. Honor his brother's memory. The fortune had been a lie. The homestead was 160 acres of stubborn earth that fought back against every seed. Thomas had 5 children of his own and a wife worn thin by frontier life. Bertie had become the extra pair of hands, the one who rose before dawn to haul water, the one who scrubbed and mended and cooked and never complained because complaining meant she'd be reminded that she was there on charity. Charity! She almost laughed. 2 months ago, Thomas had come home from the settlement town of Benson Creek with whiskey on his breath and panic in his eyes. He'd gambled. Cards, dice, whatever the men at the saloon had been playing. He'd lost the deed to the homestead, the paper that said these 160 acres of hard-scrabble Montana dirt belonged to him. Lost it to Silas Blackwood. Blackwood owned half the territory, or near enough. Land, cattle, timber rights, water rights, contract with the army at Fort Ellis. He collected debts the way some men collected stamps. And he collected women the same way. Mr. Blackwood is a respectable man, Margaret said now, not looking at Bertie. He's offering you a home. Security. You'll want for nothing. I'll want for my freedom, Bertie said quietly. Margaret's hand came up fast, not to strike, just to stop the words. Don't make this harder than it is. We have no choice. Thomas owes him the deed, and we have 5 children to feed. Mr. Blackwood has offered to take you as his wife and cancel the debt. It's legal. Father O'Malley says the papers are in order. Does Father O'Malley know I haven't agreed to this marriage? You're 15. You don't have to agree. Thomas is your legal guardian, and he's given consent. Margaret's voice cracked. Bertie, please. What would you have us do? Lose the land? Starve? My children. I'm a child, too, Bertie said. I was your brother-in-law's child. Doesn't that mean anything? Margaret turned away. Get in the wagon. The crossroads was an hour's ride south, near the boundary of the Crow Reservation. Bertie had never been this far from the homestead. The land here was different, wilder with more trees, the mountains closer and more present. The Bighorn Range rose to the east like a serrated knife blade cutting the sky. Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop where 2 dirt tracks intersected. A stand of cottonwood trees provided shade. A creek ran nearby. Bertie could hear the water moving over stones. Another wagon was already there. Silas Blackwood stepped down from it with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. He was 52, thick through the middle, with iron gray hair and eyes the color of creek ice. He wore a suit, actual Eastern cloth, not homespun, and carried a leather document case. Behind him, 2 hired men waited by the wagon. They had the look of men paid to make sure transactions went smoothly. One rested his hand on the pistol at his belt. "O'Connor," Blackwood said, nodding to Thomas. "You brought her? Good." Thomas climbed down from the wagon. His hands shook as he helped Bertie down. She felt his fingers tremble against her arm. "Mr. Blackwood, sir," Thomas said. His voice had the quality of a man drowning. "The girl she's a good worker. You'll have no trouble from her." "I'm sure I won't." Blackwood's eyes moved over Bertie like she was livestock, assessing, calculating value. Red hair, the Irish breeding shows. "You'll clean up fine." Bertie said nothing. Her grandmother had taught her a prayer in Irish Gaelic, back when prayers still seemed like they might be answered. She said it now, silently. "Bail O'Dia Ort, God's protection be on you." Though she wasn't sure anymore if God was paying attention to girls sold at crossroads in Montana. Blackwood opened his document case and produced 2 items, a sheaf of papers and a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of gold coins. "The deed to your homestead," he said, holding up the papers. "Signed over to you, free and clear, upon completion of the transaction, and $50 in coin for your trouble." Thomas stared at the gold like a man staring at his own damnation. "The marriage contract," Blackwood continued, producing another document, "already signed by me and witnessed by Judge Carver in Benson Creek. You'll sign as her guardian, and the girl will make her mark. She can write her name, I assume." "I can write my name," Bertie said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "And I can read those papers, too. They say marriage, but we all know what this is. You're buying me." Blackwood's smile was thin and cold. "I'm providing you with a home and my name. If you prefer to think of it in transactional terms, then yes. Your uncle is settling his debt with your companionship. It's all perfectly legal, girl. The judge has approved it." "Judges can be bought same as deeds," Bertie said. Thomas grabbed her arm. "Bertie, please. Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't speak. Don't object to being sold like a milk cow." She turned to her uncle, and for the first time in 5 years, she let him see her anger. "You promised my father. You stood over his grave and promised you'd take care of me." "I am taking care of you," Thomas said desperately. "Blackwood's rich. You'll have a roof, food, fine clothes. I'll have a cage." She pulled her arm free. "And you know it." Blackwood's patience was thinning. "Enough talk. Sign the papers, O'Connor. Let's conclude our business." Thomas reached for the pen. And that was when the riders appeared. They came from the tree line to the east. 6 of them on horseback, moving in formation that spoke of military precision. But these were not soldiers. They wore no uniforms. Their hair hung long and dark, adorned with feathers and beads. Their clothing was buckskin and trade cloth, and they carried rifles with the easy familiarity of men who knew how to use them. Crow warriors. Bertie had seen Crow people before at a distance when they came to trade at the fort, but she'd never been this close. Never seen them like this. In their own element, on their own terms, moving with a kind of authority that came from belonging to a place for longer than any treaty or deed could measure. The leader was a man in his 30s, lean and tall, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountain behind him. He wore his hair in 2 long braids wrapped with red cloth, and a bone breastplate covered his chest. A single eagle feather hung from his hair. He raised one hand, and his warriors fanned out in a semicircle around the crossroads. Not threatening, yet, but present, unmistakably present. Blackwood's hired men both reached for their guns. "I wouldn't," the Crow leader said in perfect English. He had a low voice, calm, the kind of calm that came from absolute certainty. "We number 6, you number 4, and you're standing on land that falls under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851. That makes this my jurisdiction, not yours. This is a private transaction," Blackwood said. His voice had an edge now, the sound of a man not used to being interrupted. "You have no authority here. That's where you're wrong. The Crow leader dismounted in a single fluid motion. He walked forward, stopping 10 feet from Blackwood. My name is Running Wolf. I'm a council member of the Absolute, the Crow Nation. This crossroad sits exactly on the boundary line established by treaty. On this land, tribal law applies, and tribal law prohibits the trading of human beings. He turned to look at Birdie. Their eyes met, and she saw something there that made her chest tight. Recognition, not of her specifically, but of what she was, what was being done to her. This girl, Running Wolf said, still looking at Birdie, is being sold. I can see it in her eyes. I can see it in how the old man holds the gold and won't meet anyone's gaze. I can see it in how she stands, ready to run. If she had anywhere to run to, he turned back to Blackwood. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States abolished slavery in 1865. It's 1867 now. The law is clear. You cannot purchase human beings. She's not a slave, Blackwood snarled. This is a marriage contract. Did she consent to this marriage? Silence. I thought not. Running Wolf's hand moved to the rifle slung across his back, not drawing it, just resting his hand on it. You will not complete this transaction. The girl stays here until proper authorities can determine her legal status. If you have a dispute, you can take it to the Army commander at Fort Ellis. Captain Howard is a reasonable man. He'll want to see your marriage contract and ask the girl some questions. Blackwood's face went red. You have no right. I have every right granted by treaty law and federal law. You're the one operating outside the law. Running Wolf's voice hardened. Leave. Now, before I decide you're engaging in human trafficking on sovereign land and deal with you according to tribal justice. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of Blackwood's hired men spoke, his voice low. Boss, maybe we should. Shut up. Blackwood's hand went to his coat, and Birdie saw the glint of metal. A pistol. 3 Crow rifles came up simultaneously, aimed and ready. Draw that gun, Running Wolf said quietly, and you'll die here. Your hired men will die. And the only question will be whether we bury you or leave you for the crows to pick clean. Choose. Blackwood's hand froze. His eyes moved from Running Wolf to the warriors, calculating odds he didn't like. Thomas found his voice desperate. Please, I need that deed back. You need to go home and think about what you tried to do today. Running Wolf said, not unkindly, a man who sells his brother's child for gold needs to examine his soul. Blackwood lowered his hand slowly. When he spoke, his voice was poison. This isn't over. I own this territory. I own the judge. I own half the Army officers at Fort Ellis. And I own your land, the land you claim under treaty. Treaties can be broken. Ask any Indian who's ever trusted the white man's paper. Some white men honor their word, Running Wolf said. Some don't. I've learned to tell the difference. He gestured toward Blackwood's wagon. Go. Blackwood went, but as his wagon rolled away, he called back, I will have that girl, and you'll regret this. Savage. All of you. The sound of wheels faded into the distance. Birdie stood in the middle of the crossroads, shaking. She wasn't sure if it was fear or relief or the simple fact that her legs had been holding her up for the last 10 minutes through sheer force of will. Running Wolf turned to her. His face was gentler now, the hardness put away. What's your name? He asked. Bridget O'Connor. Birdie. Irish. Yes. Your uncle, does he treat you well? She could have lied. Should have lied. Probably. Family was family. Blood was blood. You didn't tell strangers your business. But she was so tired of lying. So tired of being small and silent and grateful for crumbs. No, she said simply. Running Wolf nodded as if he'd expected that answer. He looked at Thomas, who stood by his wagon, the gold still in his hand, looking like a man who'd watched his last hope ride away. You were going to sell her to that man, Running Wolf said. It wasn't a question. I owed him money, the deed to my land. He said if I gave him the girl, he'd cancel the debt. I have 5 children of my own. They need. Thomas's voice broke. What was I supposed to do? Be a man of honor. Running Wolf said quietly. But it's too late for that now. He walked to his horse and removed 2 items from his saddlebag, a bundle of furs and a small pouch. He returned and held them out to Thomas. Beaver pelts, prime quality, worth more than whatever Blackwood was offering you, and $20 in coin. This pays your debt. Thomas stared at the furs, confused. I don't understand. You owe Blackwood for your deed. I'm paying that debt. In exchange, the girl comes with me. She'll be under protection of the Crow Nation until a proper legal authority can determine her status. If she chooses to return to you, she can. If she chooses to stay with us, that's her right. But she will not be sold. You can't just take her. I'm not taking her. I'm offering her protection. There's a difference. Running Wolf looked at Bertie. Do you want to go back with your uncle? If you do, I won't stop you. But know this. If you go back, I can't protect you from what he might do next. The next time, I might not be here. Bertie looked at Thomas, at the gold in his hand, at the furs he was already calculating the value of, at the wagon where Aunt Margaret sat, silent, not even looking at her. She thought of 5 more years of being the extra mouth, of knowing that when times got hard again, and they always got hard, she was the one who could be traded away, of waking up one morning to find she'd been promised to some other man who saw her as property. She thought of Silas Blackwood's cold eyes and the way he'd looked at her like she was something he'd already owned. I'll go with you, she said to Running Wolf. Thomas made a sound like a wounded animal. Bertie, please. Your mother would. My mother is dead, Bertie said. The words came out harder than she meant them, but they were true. And my father is dead, and I love them, but they're gone. You're all I had left of family, and you just tried to sell me for a pile of furs and a land deed. She turned to Running Wolf. If you're lying to me, if this is just another kind of trap, I'll find a way to survive that too. But I'd rather take my chances with strangers who stopped my sale than stay with family who arranged it. Running Wolf's expression softened. For just a moment, she saw something like pain cross his face. Old pain, the kind that lived in a person's bones. I'm not lying, he said, and it's not a trap. I give you my word. Then I'm ready to go. Another rider approached from the tree line, an older woman, gray-haired, with a face like weathered copper and eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. She wore a dress of soft doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and rode her horse like she'd been born on it. Running Wolf spoke to her in Crow, a language that sounded like water over stones, musical and strange. The woman replied, her eyes on Bertie, and then she smiled. My Aunt Medicine Song Woman, Running Wolf said to Bertie. She says you have the eyes of someone who's been walking in a storm. She wants to know if you're ready to come inside from the rain. Bertie felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for 5 years. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'm ready. She walked to the Crow Riders, leaving behind her uncle in the wagon and the dress that was too clean for what had almost happened. One of the younger warriors offered his hand and pulled her up behind him on his horse. As they rode toward the tree line, Bertie looked back one last time. Thomas stood in the crossroads, furs in one hand, gold in the other, watching his niece disappear with people he'd been taught to fear. Margaret had finally gotten down from the wagon. She was crying now. Too late for it to matter. Bertie turned away and faced forward. Behind her, the storm. Ahead, something she couldn't name yet. But it felt like the opposite of being sold. It felt like being found. The Crow camp appeared gradually, like something emerging from mist. First, thin columns of smoke rising above the cottonwood trees. Then the sound of voices, children laughing, women talking, dogs barking. Then the teepees themselves, dozens of them arranged in a wide circle along a creek that ran clear and fast. The late afternoon sun turned the painted buffalo hides golden, and Bertie saw images on them. Horses, eagles, geometric patterns that probably meant something she didn't understand. The rider she shared a horse with, a young man whose name was Swift Arrow, he'd told her in halting English, slowed as they entered the camp. People stopped what they were doing to watch. Not hostile, but curious. A white girl in a too large green dress, riding with warriors, was apparently unusual. Running Wolf spoke in Crow, his voice carrying across the camp. Birdie caught her own name in the flow of unfamiliar words. People nodded. Some looked at her with what might have been pity, others with what might have been suspicion. She couldn't blame them for either. Medicine Song Woman dismounted with the ease of someone half her age and gestured for Birdie to follow. The old woman's teepee stood near the center of the camp circle, larger than most, decorated with images of plants and birds that Birdie recognized from the Montana plains. Yarrow, sage, ravens, hawks. Inside it was cool and dim and smelled of smoke and herbs. Buffalo robes covered the floor. A small fire burned in the center, the smoke rising through an opening at the top. Parfleches, decorated rawhide containers, hung from the lodge poles, along with bundles of dried plants that Birdie didn't recognize. It was the cleanest, most organized living space Birdie had seen in 5 years. The sod house had been cramped and dirty, with too many people and not enough room. This felt spacious, intentional, like every item had its place and purpose. Medicine Song Woman gestured for Birdie to sit on one of the robes. The old woman moved to the fire and began preparing something in a clay pot, adding water from a leather bag, then dried meat, then something green that might have been wild onions. "You eat," Medicine Song Woman said in English. Her accent was thick, her words careful but comprehensible. "Thin, too thin, need strong." "Thank you," Birdie said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The old woman's eyes were kind but sharp. She studied Birdie the way someone might study a plant they were trying to identify, looking for signs, symptoms, properties. "Scared?" she asked. Birdie considered lying, then decided against it. "Yes." "Good. Scared means smart. Not scared means fool." Medicine Song Woman stirred the pot. "You safe here. Running Wolf says so. Medicine Song Woman says so. That means something. You understand?" "I think so. Men who want by you, bad men. Your uncle," she made a gesture that needed no translation. "Weak, disappointing. Family no always good just because blood. Sometimes chosen family better than born family." She said it with the weight of someone who knew that truth personally. They sat in silence while the food cooked. Birdie became aware of how her body felt. Every muscle tight, every nerve still waiting for the next blow, the next crisis. She'd been holding herself rigid for so long she'd forgotten what relaxed felt like. The soup, when Medicine Song Woman served it in a wooden bowl, was the best thing Birdie had tasted in years. Rich, flavorful, with actual chunks of meat instead of thin gruel with occasional ham bits that had been most of her meals at the sod house. She ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate, but Medicine Song Woman saw right through her. "Eat all," the old woman said. "More if want. Here, no one take food from you. No one say you eat too much, take too much, want too much. You child. Children need eat." That kindness, casual, matter-of-fact kindness, made Birdie's throat tight. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You don't know me. I'm nobody." Medicine Song Woman's face grew serious. "Nobody is nobody. Every person is somebody. Creator make no nobody." She paused and added, "Running Wolf lose sister. Long time ago. French trappers take her. Trade for furs, like you almost traded. He try to find. Never find. That pain." She touched her own chest. "Live here still. He see you, he see her. He no save her. But he save you." Birdie set down the bowl. "What happened to his sister?" "No one know. Maybe dead. Maybe alive somewhere with man who buy her. Treated like thing instead of person. That not knowing, worse than knowing, maybe." Medicine Song Woman's eyes held old grief. She was 14 summers. Name was Bright Morning. Laugh like stream water. Now no laugh. Just memory. "I'm sorry," Birdie said, because she didn't know what else to say. "Sorry no fix. But today, one girl not sold. That's something. That one victory against men who think people are things." The old woman poured more soup. "You sleep here. Tomorrow learn. Day after, learn more. Eventually, choose." "Choose what?" "Choose where you belong. White world or absolute world. Or maybe She smiled slightly. Both. Stand in middle, see both sides. That powerful place, middle. Most people afraid of middle. You may be brave enough for middle. As the evening darkened, other people came to Medicine Song Woman's lodge. Running Wolf arrived with his family, his wife, Pretty Shield, a woman in her late 20s with a quick smile and shrewd eyes, their 3 children, ranging from a toddler to a boy of about 9, and Running Wolf's mother, a dignified elder who introduced herself as Gives Away Horses Woman. They brought food, fresh elk meat, wild turnips, berries. They brought clothing, a dress of soft doeskin that would fit Birdie better than the borrowed wool. They brought questions, delivered through Running Wolf's translation. My wife wants to know, do you have skills? Can you sew, cook, tend hides, gather plants? I can sew and cook, Birdie said. I don't know about the rest. Pretty Shield spoke rapidly, and Running Wolf smiled. She says teaching you will give the other women something to talk about besides her for a while. Apparently, I forgot to bring back enough buffalo sinew from the last hunt, and she's been letting me hear about it. Despite everything, Birdie almost laughed. The children were less interested in diplomacy. The 9-year-old boy, whose name was Lil Hawk, simply stared at her hair, red like sunset. He said in careful English, "Can I touch?" "Little Hawk," his mother admonished. "It's all right," Birdie said. She leaned forward, and the boy gently touched one of her braids, his eyes wide. "Irish people all have this," he asked. "Some do. Not all. I got it from my mother. It's pretty. Different, but pretty." That night, Birdie slept on a buffalo robe in Medicine Song Woman's lodge, warm for the first time in months, her stomach full for the first time, and she couldn't remember how long. She should have felt safe. Instead, she felt terrified, because safety, in her experience, was always temporary. And when it ended badly. The days that followed fell into a rhythm Birdie had never experienced before, a rhythm dictated not by someone else's demands, but by the natural flow of the camp's life. She woke with the sun and helped Medicine Song Woman prepare morning food. Then the old woman would take her on walks, teaching her about plants, which roots to dig, which leaves to harvest, which berries were safe and which would make you sick. "This biscuit root," Medicine Song Woman said, digging up a plant with a thick taproot. "Dry it, pound it, and make flour. Good for bread, good for medicine, good for everything. Mother Earth provide if you know how to ask." Birdie learned that asking meant prayers in Crow, offerings of tobacco, gratitude spoken aloud to plants before harvesting them. It felt strange at first, talking to plants, but Medicine Song Woman did it with such matter-of-fact reverence that it started to seem normal. Pretty Shield taught her hide tanning, a process that involved scraping, soaking, working the leather until it was soft. It was hard work, harder than anything Birdie had done at the sod house, but different. Here, the work was teaching her something, making her capable, not just grinding her down. The children taught her Crow words. Lil Hawk was particularly patient, pointing at objects and repeating their names until Birdie could say them without mangling the pronunciation too badly. Bylike, good. Ash, woman. Isaki, song. Ko, grandmother. And at night, around the fires, she listened to stories. Running Wolf would translate when the stories were in Crow, but sometimes they were told in English for her benefit. Tales of Old Man Coyote, the trickster who created the world and was constantly getting into trouble. Stories of great hunts, brave warriors, clever women who saved their people through wit rather than strength. She learned that the Crow called themselves Absolute, children of the large-beaked bird, which white people mistranslated as crow. She learned that they'd lived in this territory for longer than any white person could measure, that they knew every creek and mountain and valley, that the land wasn't something they owned but something they belonged to. And she learned that Running Wolf's story about his sister was just one of many. Swift Arrow's cousin had been taken by a raiding party from another tribe and sold to a trading post. Gives Away Horses Woman's niece had married a white trapper who'd promised to treat her well, then abandoned her pregnant and penniless in a town 3 territories away. "White men come here, see our women, think we're all for sale," Running Wolf told her one evening. They were sitting by the creek, watching the water move over stones. Sometimes they marry properly, honor our ways, become part of the tribe. But sometimes they take and leave, or they take and keep, and treat our women like servants, like property, like Blackwood wanted to do to me, Bertie said. Exactly like that. The color of your skin doesn't matter. To men like him, women are things to be bought. Running Wolf picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. My sister, Bright Morning, she was beautiful, smart, wanted to be a healer like our aunt. French trappers came through, said they wanted to trade. One of them saw her, decided he wanted her, offered furs, knives, whiskey. Our father said no. Our mother said no. Bright Morning said no. He threw the stone into the creek. It made a small splash and disappeared. They took her anyway. In the night, by the time we found out, they were 3 days gone. I tracked them for 2 weeks. Found their camp, but she wasn't there anymore. They'd already traded her to someone else. Trail went cold near Fort Benton. I searched for months. Never found her. I'm sorry, Bertie said quietly. I tell you this not for sympathy, but so you understand what happened to you is what happens to many women. White, Indian, Mexican, black, doesn't matter. When men see women as property, we all become things to be bought and sold and traded. That's why I stopped your sale. That's why I'll stop any sale I see, no matter who's being sold. 3 weeks into her stay, Father O'Malley arrived at the camp. The Irish priest rode a tire mule and looked like he'd aged 10 years since Bertie had last seen him at Sunday, Massachusetts. He asked for her in English and was brought to Medicine Song Woman's Lodge, where he found Bertie grinding dried biscuit root into flour, her hands dusty, her hair in 2 long braids crow style, wearing the doeskin dress with beadwork on the shoulders. Mother of God, he breathed. Bridget. Hello, Father. She set down the grinding stone. He dismounted and approached slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. Child, are you all right? Your uncle came to me, said you'd been taken by Indians, said he feared for your safety. My uncle, Bertie interrupted, tried to sell me to Silas Blackwood to settle a gambling debt. The crow stopped the sale. I'm here by choice. O'Malley's face went through several emotions, shock, disbelief, something that might have been shame. Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Thomas said it was a marriage arrangement. Did he mention that I wasn't asked? That I didn't consent? That I'm 15 years old and Blackwood is 52 and already has 2 other wives he keeps locked on his ranch? The priest sat down heavily on a log near the fire. I saw the marriage papers. They were legal. Thomas signed as guardian. Legal doesn't mean right. Father, you taught me that. You said in your sermons that God's law is higher than man's law. Well, man's law said Thomas could sell me. God's law says I'm not property. She gestured around the camp. These people understand that. They stopped it. They gave me food, shelter, safety, and asked for nothing in return except that I learn and contribute. Can you say the same for my own family? O'Malley removed his hat and ran his hand through his thinning hair. The frontier it's hard, Bridget. People make choices they wouldn't make otherwise. Your uncle is desperate. 5 children, failing crops. I know. I lived it. I was the 7th mouth to feed, the one who wasn't really family, the one who could be sacrificed when things got hard. Bertie's voice stayed level. I don't hate my uncle, Father. I pity him, but I won't go back there. I won't be the thing they trade away next time he gambles wrong. Medicine Song Woman appeared in the lodge entrance, arms crossed, watching the priest with eyes that missed nothing. She spoke to Bertie in Crow, words Bertie now understood. This man trouble? No, Cale. He's a holy man for my people. He means well, but he doesn't understand. The old woman grunted. Holy men often don't understand women's troubles. Too much thinking, not enough listening. Father O'Malley, who didn't speak Crow, looked between them nervously. What did she say? She asked if you were here to cause trouble, Bertie said. I told her no. I'm here because I'm worried about your soul, child, living among heathens. Careful, Father. Running Wolf's voice came from behind the priest. He'd approached silently, The way he seemed to move everywhere. You're a guest here. Guests who insult their host don't stay guests long. O'Malley turned, startled. I meant no offense. I'm simply concerned for the girl's spiritual welfare. Her spiritual welfare was better served by stopping her from being sold than by allowing to proceed legally, Running Wolf said. But perhaps your God sees things differently than mine. The priest's face reddened. The church doesn't approve of selling children. Then why didn't you stop it? The question hung in the air, sharp as a knife. You knew about the marriage arrangement. You saw the papers. Did you ask Bridget if she consented? Did you question why a 15-year-old Irish girl was marrying a 52-year-old land baron? Or did you just sign the witness line and collect whatever donation Blackwood offered? It wasn't my place to interfere in family decisions. It's a priest's place to protect the vulnerable. Running Wolf said quietly. That's what my aunt does. That's what I try to do. If your God is the same God Bridget prays to, then he wanted her protected. We protected her. You blessed the papers that would have enslaved her. Which of us served God better? Father O'Malley had no answer. He left shortly after, promising to pray for Bertie's soul. She watched him ride away on his tired mule and felt nothing but relief. He meant well, she said to Running Wolf. Good intentions don't feed hungry people or stop bad men, Running Wolf replied. Only actions do. Remember that. That night, the camp received news that changed everything. A rider came from Fort Ellis, a young private who'd been sent as a messenger. He delivered his news to Running Wolf in front of the assembled council. Silas Blackwood had filed a formal complaint with the territorial authorities. He was claiming theft of property, Bertie, violation of contract, and demanding that the Army retrieve her and return her to his custody. Captain James Howard, the post commander, was requesting a meeting. All parties involved would need to appear at the fort in 3 days for a hearing to determine Bertie's legal status. It's a trap, Swift Arrow said hotly. They'll take her the moment she steps onto fort grounds. Maybe, Running Wolf said, or maybe it's an opportunity. Captain Howard is a fair man. I've dealt with him before on treaty matters. He honors his word. He's still Army, still white, still part of the system that takes our land and breaks its promises, Swift Arrow argued. True, but he's also bound by law, and law is sometimes on our side. Running Wolf looked at Bertie. The decision is yours. We can refuse to attend. Keep you here, under tribal protection. But that means you'll always be in limbo, not free, not captive, but caught between. Or we can go to the hearing, present our case, and force them to make a legal ruling. Bertie thought of Blackwood's cold eyes, of the power he wielded, of judges who could be bought, and laws that bent for men with money. She also thought of Medicine Song Woman's words, stand in middle, see both sides. That powerful place, middle. I'll go, she said. I'll testify. I'll tell the truth about what happened, and let them decide if their own laws mean anything. Running Wolf smiled. Brave choice. Scary choice. But I think it's the right one. Medicine Song Woman stepped forward and placed both hands on Bertie's shoulders. Before you go to this hearing, we offer you something. Protection stronger than guns, stronger than treaties. What is it? Adoption. If Crow Nation adopt you, you become absolute by law, covered by all treaties, all protections. You become our daughter, our sister, our granddaughter. No one can buy you, sell you, or claim you without going through entire Crow Nation first. Bertie's breath caught. You would do that? For me? Not for you, the old woman said gently. With you, family is not just blood. Family is choice. You choose us, we choose you. That make family. But if I'm adopted, I won't be able to go back to the white world, will I? I'll be legally Indian? Yes, Running Wolf said. And legally Indian means you can't own property in your own name, can't vote, can't testify against white people in most courts. It means restrictions, prejudice. It means being part of a people the U.S. government is actively trying to destroy. It's not an easy choice, but it's a free choice, Medicine Song Woman added. Not sold, not forced, chosen. Pretty Shield spoke up, her English improving every day. You family already. Adoption, just make it official. Make it strong. Make it law they have to respect. The council debated long into the night. Some elders worried about setting a precedent. What if every displaced white person came seeking adoption as a way to escape their troubles? Others argued that protecting one child was always worth it, regardless of precedent. In the end, Pretty Shield's voice carried the day. She stood before the council and spoke in Crow, passionate and fierce, and when Running Wolf translated for Bertie, his voice was thick with emotion. She says, "When I gave birth to my children, I didn't ask if they would be easy children or difficult children, useful children or troublesome children. I accepted them as they came, because that's what mothers do. Bridget is a child who needs a mother. I volunteer to be that mother. If the council won't adopt her, my family will, and anyone who wants to take her will have to go through me first." The council voted, 12 in favor, 2 abstaining, none against. Bertie was officially adopted into the Crow Nation, into Running Wolf's family, under the guardianship of Medicine Song Woman and the protection of the entire tribe. The ceremony was simple but profound. Medicine Song Woman painted Bertie's face with white clay mixed with sacred herbs. Running Wolf presented her with a new name in Crow, Baikalikaishiash, Red Bird Woman, the name her parents had given her, translated and honored in a new language. She was still Bridget O'Connor, but she was also Red Bird Woman of the Absolute, standing in the middle, belonging to both worlds. Or at least she would be, if the Army didn't decide otherwise. The hearing at Fort Ellis will determine if Bertie's adoption is recognized by U.S. law, or she'll be forced back into Blackwood's control. Will tribal sovereignty be honored, or will corruption win? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe to Awesome Stories and turn on notifications to see justice unfold in this incredible true-to-history drama. Fort Ellis sat on a plateau overlooking the Gallatin Valley, a collection of log buildings arranged around a parade ground with the American flag snapping in the wind. It was the largest concentration of white authority Bertie had seen since arriving in Montana, and the sight of it made her stomach clench. She rode behind Running Wolf, wearing both her doeskin dress and a blanket draped over her shoulders like armor. Medicine Song Woman rode beside them on a sturdy mare, her face calm but her eyes missing nothing. Swift Arrow and 3 other warriors accompanied them, not as a war party, but as witnesses and protection. Captain James Howard met them at the fort gates. He was younger than Bertie expected, maybe 38, with a weathered face that had seen things he'd rather forget. He wore his Union blue uniform with care, and his eyes held a particular weariness of men who'd fought in the Civil War and lived to rebuild in its aftermath. "Running Wolf," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Captain Howard." Running Wolf shook his hand. "I brought all parties as requested. This is Red Bird Woman, Bridget O'Connor. These are witnesses from the Crow Nation." Howard's eyes moved to Bertie. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, of what she was, a child caught in something much larger than herself. "Miss O'Connor," he said gently, "I've been informed of the circumstances of your situation. I want you to know that this hearing is meant to determine the truth and apply the law fairly. Do you understand?" "I understand that the law hasn't been fair to me so far," Bertie said, "but I'm here anyway." A flicker of surprise crossed Howard's face, followed by what might have been respect. "Fair enough. Come inside." The hearing was held in the fort's administrative building, a large room with a table at one end and chairs arranged for witnesses and observers. Captain Howard presided, flanked by a territorial judge, a thin man named Carver who Bertie recognized as the one who'd supposedly approved her marriage papers, and a civilian observer from Benson Creek. Silas Blackwood sat on one side with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man from Helena named Thornton. Thomas O'Connor sat miserably beside them, looking like he wished he could disappear. Running Wolf, Medicine Song Woman, and the Crow witnesses sat on the other side. Bertie was placed in the center, literally between 2 worlds. "This hearing," Captain Howard began, "is convened to determine the legal status of Bridget O'Connor, age 15, and to adjudicate the claims made by Mr. Silas Blackwood regarding a marriage contract and alleged theft of property. Mr. Blackwood, you may present your case first. Thornton, the lawyer, stood. Captain Howard, Judge Carver, gentlemen. The facts are simple. Mr. Blackwood entered into a legal contract with Thomas O'Connor, the girl's legal guardian, for a marriage arrangement. Papers were drawn up, signed, and witnessed. Mr. Blackwood paid $50 and forgave a substantial debt. Before the marriage could be completed, Crow Indians intervened and kidnapped the girl. They have held her for nearly 4 weeks against her will and against the law. That's a lie. Birdie said, standing. I went with them by choice. The witness will wait her turn. Judge Carver said coldly. Captain Howard raised a hand. Miss O'Connor, you'll have your chance to speak. Please sit. She sat, fists clenched. Thornton continued. Mr. Blackwood is a respectable businessman, a landowner, and a contributor to this community. He has every right to expect that legal contracts will be honored. He asks this court to order the return of his property. She's not property, Running Wolf interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery in 1865. It is 1867. No person can be property under United States law. This isn't slavery, Thornton shot back. This is a marriage contract. Did the girl consent to this marriage? Running Wolf demanded. Her guardian consented, which is all that's required. That's not what I asked. Did she consent? Silence hung in the room. Judge Carver spoke up. In matters of marriage for minors, parental or guardian consent is sufficient under territorial law. The girl's individual consent is not required. Then your law, Running Wolf said quietly, permits slavery by another name. The room erupted. Blackwood's lawyers shouted objections. Blackwood himself stood red-faced and furious, and Captain Howard had to bang his hand on the table 3 times to restore order. Enough! Howard's voice carried the authority of a man who commanded troops in battle. Everyone will get their turn to speak. Mr. Thornton, continue. Thornton gathered himself. As I was saying, Mr. Blackwood has legal claim to Miss O'Connor through a valid marriage contract. The Crow interference was illegal and constitutes theft. We ask that she be returned to Mr. Blackwood's custody immediately and that the Crow be sanctioned for violating territorial law. Captain Howard, Running Wolf said, standing. May I present our defense? You may. Running Wolf walked to the center of the room. He was unarmed. They'd all been required to leave weapons outside. But he carried himself with the dignity of a warrior and the precision of a lawyer. The 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty, Article 5, grants the Crow Nation authority over our territorial boundaries. The crossroad where this transaction took place falls within those boundaries. Under treaty law, we have jurisdiction over crimes committed there. Alleged crimes, Thornton interjected. Human trafficking is not an allegation. It's a fact. Mr. Blackwood was purchasing a 15-year-old girl against her will. That violates the 13th Amendment, which supersedes all territorial law and all marriage law. Running Wolf pulled out a paper and unfolded it. I have here a sworn statement from Father Benedict O'Malley, the Catholic priest who witnessed the marriage papers. In it, he states that he never spoke to Miss O'Connor directly, never asked if she consented, and was given a $50 donation by Mr. Blackwood on the same day he signed as witness. Judge Carver's face went white. That's a lie. Is it? Running Wolf looked at the judge. Because Father O'Malley also states that you, Judge Carver, were present when the papers were signed, that you approved them and received a consultation fee of $100 from Mr. Blackwood. Would you like to dispute that under oath? Carver said nothing, his jaw working. Captain Howard's expression had gone from neutral to dangerously cold. Judge Carver, is this true? It's common for judges to receive fees for document preparation. Were you paid by Mr. Blackwood to approve a marriage contract for a 15-year-old girl who was never consulted? Carver stood abruptly. I don't have to answer to you, Captain. I'm a territorial judge who just admitted to taking bribes to facilitate what looks increasingly like human trafficking. Howard turned to his aide. Lieutenant Morrison, please note that Judge Carver is recusing himself from this hearing due to conflict of interest. His testimony may be required later under oath. Carver left, slamming the door behind him. Blackwood was on his feet now. This is absurd. Captain, you can't possibly be taking the word of a savage over a respected member of this community. Mr. Blackwood, Howard said, his voice like ice. Sit down and be silent, or I'll have you removed. Blackwood sat, fury radiating from him. Howard turned to Thomas O'Connor. Mr. O'Connor, you're Miss O'Connor's uncle and legal guardian. Tell me in your own words what happened. Thomas looked like a man facing execution. I lost my homestead deed in a card game to Mr. Blackwood. I couldn't pay him back. He said he'd forgive the debt if I gave him Bertie for marriage. Did you ask Bertie if she wanted this marriage? Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. No. Did you explain to her what was being arranged? She knew. Did she agree? Silence. Mr. O'Connor, answer the question. Did your niece agree to marry Mr. Blackwood? She didn't have a choice. I'm her guardian. I make those decisions. So she didn't agree? No. Howard wrote something down, his face unreadable. And what would have happened to her if she'd refused to go with Mr. Blackwood that day? Thomas swallowed hard. I don't know. I needed that debt paid. I have 5 children. What would have happened, Mr. O'Connor? I would have made her go anyway, Thomas said, his voice breaking. God forgive me. I would have forced her. The room was silent, except for the scratch of Howard's pen. Miss O'Connor, the captain said, looking at Bertie, you may speak now. Tell us what happened. In your own words. Bertie stood. Her legs shook, but her voice came out steady. My parents died in Ireland when I was 10. The Great Famine took them, like it took 1,000,000 others. My Uncle Thomas came to Ireland and promised my father, his own brother, that he'd take me to America and raise me as his own. She looked directly at Thomas as she spoke. He couldn't meet her eyes. For 5 years, I worked in his house like a servant. I was fed, but barely. I had a place to sleep, but I was reminded every day that I was a burden. When my uncle gambled away his land deed, I became the solution to his problem. He agreed to give me to Mr. Blackwood, a man 40 years older than me, a man I'd never spoken to, in exchange for canceling his debt. Did you want to marry Mr. Blackwood? Howard asked. No. Did anyone ask what you wanted? No. What would have happened if you'd refused? Bertie's voice hardened. My uncle just told you. He would have forced me. And if the Crow had intervened that day, I would right now be living on Mr. Blackwood's ranch. Not as a wife, but as property. Just like the 2 other women he keeps there, who don't show their faces in town and who aren't allowed to leave. Blackwood shot to his feet. That's slander. My wives are perfectly. Sit. Down. Howard's command left no room for argument. Blackwood sat. The captain turned to Running Wolf. You mentioned that the Crow Nation has adopted Miss O'Connor. Explain that, please. Medicine Song Woman stood, and Running Wolf translated as she spoke in Crow. Under our law, a child without protection can be adopted into the tribe. We choose her. She choose us. Now she is absolute. She is my granddaughter, Running Wolf's cousin, Pretty Shield's daughter. She has name, Red Bird Woman. She has family. She has home. No one sell her now. To take her from us, you have to break treaty. You have to say Crow adoption means nothing. You have to say our law is less than your law, even on our own land. Howard listened carefully to the translation, then asked, Miss O'Connor, is this true? Did you accept adoption into the Crow Nation? I did, understanding that it means you're legally considered Indian, that you'll face restrictions, prejudice, and legal limitations. I understand, and I choose it anyway. Because these people, she gestured to Medicine Song Woman, Running Wolf, the warriors sitting silent and watchful, they protected me when my own family wouldn't. They fed me when I was hungry. They taught me when I was ignorant. They gave me a choice when everyone else just told me what I was going to do. That's more family than blood ever gave me. Something in Howard's expression shifted. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. This court, he said finally, needs to consider several legal questions. First, Was the marriage contract valid? Second, does the Crow adoption have legal standing? Third, what is in the best interest of the minor in question? He looked around the room. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I need to review treaty law and consult with the territorial attorney. Everyone is dismissed except Miss O'Connor. The room emptied slowly. Blackwood left last, but not before leaning close to Bertie and whispering, "You think you've won, girl, but I own this territory. I own the judges, the lawyers, the politicians. Even if the captain rules against me today, I'll get you eventually, one way or another." Then he was gone. Captain Howard waited until they were alone. "Miss O'Connor, I need to ask you something directly. Are you safe with the Crow? Are they treating you well?" "They're treating me better than my own family ever did. If I rule that you must return to your uncle or to Mr. Blackwood, what will you do?" Bertie met his eyes. "I'll run, and I'll keep running. I'd rather die free in these mountains and live as someone's property." Howard nodded slowly, like she confirmed something he'd suspected. "Then I have my answer." That night, Bertie stayed in a small room at the fort, under guard. For her protection, Howard said. She didn't sleep. Every sound made her jump, waiting for Blackwood's men to break down the door. Instead, around midnight, there was a soft knock. "Miss O'Connor?" It was Captain Howard's voice. "May I speak with you?" She opened the door. Howard stood there alone, out of uniform, looking tired and old in the lamplight. "I've made my decision," he said quietly. "But I wanted you to know first, before I announce it tomorrow. The marriage contract is invalid. It was obtained through coercion and bribery. Judge Carver will be investigated and likely removed from the bench. Mr. Blackwood will face charges of attempted human trafficking." Bertie's breath caught. "And me? The Crow adoption is valid under treaty law. You're legally a member of the Crow Nation under the guardianship of Medicine Song Woman. Your uncle has no further legal claim to you." She felt her knees weaken. I'm free." "You're free." Howard's smile was sad. "Or as free as any Indian can be in a territory that doesn't respect treaty law when it's inconvenient. But on paper, legally, officially, you're no longer property. You're a person with family and protection." "Why?" Bertie asked. "Why are you doing this? You could have ruled the other way. It would have been easier." "I fought in the war, Miss O'Connor. I fought for the Union because I believe that no person should be owned by another. I watched men die for that principle. If I turn around now and say a 15-year-old girl could be sold because her uncle signed papers, then what did those men die for?" He looked out the window at the dark mountains. "Besides, I have a daughter. She's 12. If I was desperate enough, if I owed the wrong people money, if I was weak enough, could I sell her? Sign papers that made it legal? I'd like to think I couldn't. But desperate men do terrible things. The law is supposed to protect people from those terrible things. Tomorrow it will." "Thank you," Bertie whispered. "Thank the Crow," Howard said. "They're the ones who had the courage to intervene. I'm just a soldier doing his job." The next morning, Captain Howard delivered his ruling before a packed room. The marriage contract was void. Blackwood had no claim. Thomas O'Connor's guardianship was terminated. The Crow adoption was legally recognized. Bridget O'Connor, Red Bird Woman, was free. Blackwood raged and threatened lawsuits. Thomas left without a word, his shoulders bowed, and Running Wolf placed his hand on Bertie's shoulder and said simply, "Welcome home, cousin." They rode back to the Crow camp in triumph. But Bertie knew it wasn't over. Men like Blackwood didn't accept defeat. They waited and planned and struck when you thought you were safe. She would have to be ready. The attack came at dawn, 3 weeks after the hearing. Bertie woke to the sound of gunfire and screaming. For a moment, disoriented in the pre-dawn darkness, she thought she was back in Ireland during the hunger riots. Then Medicine Song Woman grabbed her arm and pulled her upright. "Men coming. Bad men. Stay with children." The old woman shoved Bertie toward the back of the lodge where Pretty Shield was already gathering Running Wolf's 3 children, wrapping them in blankets, their eyes wide with fear. "How many?" Running Wolf's voice came from near the lodge entrance. He was pulling on his shirt, reaching for his rifle. 6, maybe 7. Swift Arrow shouted from outside. White men. Hired guns. They're going for Medicine Song Woman's lodge. They're after the girl. Of course they were. Birdie felt ice flood her veins. Blackwood had sent men to take her. She'd known it was coming, had felt it like a storm building on the horizon, but knowing didn't make it less terrifying. Running Wolf looked at her, his face grim. We'll protect you, but you need to hide. Where? Pretty Shield was already moving, pulling up a section of buffalo hide from the lodge floor to reveal a shallow depression, a cache pit for storing food in winter. Here, with children, stay quiet. Birdie climbed in with Little Hawk, his younger sister, and the toddler. Pretty Shield covered them with a hide, then piled robes and supplies on top. Through a small gap, Birdie could see into the lodge. The gunfire intensified. She heard war cries in Crow, shouts in English, the sharp crack of rifles and the deeper boom of shotguns. The children huddled against her, shaking. It's all right, she whispered in Crow, the words coming easier now after weeks of practice. Akpatatia, your father is very brave. He'll protect us. Little Hawk whispered back. Are the bad men coming for you? Yes. Why? Because a bad man thinks he owns me. But he doesn't. Nobody owns anybody. Through the gap, she saw Running Wolf take position at the lodge entrance, rifle ready. Medicine Song Woman stood beside him, holding a knife that looked like it had been used for more than just cutting roots. Pretty Shield had a bow, an arrow already knocked. The lodge flap burst open. A man stumbled in one of Blackwood's hired guns, a thick-necked brute with a shotgun. He saw Running Wolf and swung the barrel up. Pretty Shield's arrow took him in the shoulder before he could fire. He screamed and fell backward, crashing into the man behind him. Running Wolf fired his rifle. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The second man went down. Then chaos. More men pouring in, desperate to get to their target. Running Wolf fighting with rifle and knife. Pretty Shield firing arrow after arrow with deadly precision. Medicine Song Woman moving like a woman half her age, her blade flashing. And through it all, Birdie heard Blackwood's voice from outside. Take her alive. I want her alive. One of the attackers spotted the pile of robes where the children were hidden. He started toward it, and Birdie's heart stopped. Swift Arrow appeared from nowhere and tackled the man, the two of them crashing to the lodge wall in a tangle of limbs and violence. The fight spilled outside. Birdie could hear it, but couldn't see. Men shouting, horses screaming, weapons firing. The children pressed closer to her, and she wrapped her arms around them, trying to shield them with her own body. Then, cutting through the chaos, a bugle call. Clear, sharp military. The United States Army had arrived. Captain Howard's voice rang out. Cease fire. All parties cease fire immediately. This is Captain James Howard of Fort Ellis, and you are all under military jurisdiction. The gunfire sputtered and stopped. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, silence returned. Pretty Shield pulled back the robes. Come out. Careful. Birdie emerged from the cache pit, the children clinging to her. The lodge was a disaster. Walls torn, possessions scattered, blood on the floor. But everyone in Running Wolf's immediate family was alive. Outside, the scene was worse. 6 white men lay on the ground, disarmed, held at gunpoint by U.S. soldiers. 2 were wounded. The one Pretty Shield had shot, and another with a deep gash across his leg. 3 Crow warriors were also wounded, including Swift Arrow, who had a bullet graze along his ribs and was being tended to by Medicine Song Woman. One of Blackwood's men was dead. A young Crow warrior named Runs Fast had taken a shotgun blast to the chest defending the camp. His body lay covered by a blanket, his wife and mother keening over him. Captain Howard sat on his horse in the center of the camp. 30 soldiers arrayed around him. His face was carved from stone. Who's in command here? He demanded. Running Wolf stepped forward, blood on his shirt. Not his own. I am. Who attacked this camp? Running Wolf pointed at the captured men. These men, hired by Silas Blackwood to kidnap Redbird Woman in violation of this court's ruling. Howard's jaw tightened. He turned to the prisoners. Is this true? One of them, braver or stupider than the others, spat on the ground. We were retrieving stolen property. That girl belongs to Mr. Blackwood by contract. That contract was ruled invalid, Howard said coldly. And Miss O'Connor is under legal protection of the Crow Nation. You just committed an act of armed aggression against a sovereign tribal nation on their own territory. That's an act of war. The man paled. Howard dismounted and approached Running Wolf. How many dead? One of ours. Runs fast. He was 19 years old. I'm sorry. Howard said it like he meant it. And you're wounded? 3. They'll live. This cannot stand, Howard said quietly. This kind of vigilante action, this disregard for treaty law and court rulings, it threatens everything. If word gets out that hired guns can attack a Crow camp without consequence, every 2-bit land grabber in the territory will think they can do the same. What will you do? Running Wolf asked. First, I'm arresting these men. They'll face charges of assault, attempted kidnapping, murder, and violation of tribal sovereignty. Second, I'm going after Blackwood himself. If he ordered this, and I'm certain he did, he'll answer for it. Howard paused. But I need something from you. What? I need you not to retaliate. I need you to let the law handle this. Swift Arrow, being bandaged nearby, laughed bitterly. Your law? Your law let Blackwood get this far. Your law said the girl could be sold in the first place. Why should we trust your law now? Because if you don't, Howard said, meeting his eyes, if the Crow retaliate against white settlers, it'll give the government the excuse they've been looking for to break the treaties entirely. You know it's true. You know there are politicians in Washington just waiting for an incident they can use to justify taking more of your land. The words hung heavy in the morning air. Running Wolf looked at his warriors, at the covered body of Runs Fast, at the burned lodges and scattered belongings. Then he looked at Bertie, standing with the children, alive because his people had defended her. We'll wait, he said finally. We'll let your law try to be just one more time. But if it fails, if Blackwood walks free, if these men get token punishment, if justice is not served, then we're done trusting white man's law. Clear. Crystal clear, Howard said. You have my word, I'll do everything in my power to see justice done. The soldiers took the prisoners away. Howard left a small detachment to help repair damage and provide medical supplies. Then he rode for Benson Creek with a warrant for Silas Blackwood's arrest. The camp spent the day mourning Runs Fast and repairing what could be repaired. His wife, a young woman named White Deer, sat beside his body and sang death songs. The sound of her grief carried across the camp like wind through cottonwoods. Bertie sat with her, not speaking. What could be said? A man had died protecting her. A 19-year-old warrior who should have had decades ahead of him was dead because she refused to be property. The weight of it was crushing. Medicine Song Woman found her there as the sun set. You blame yourself. He died because of me. No, he died because bad men attacked. You know shoot him. You know cause this. Bad men cause this. The old woman sat beside her. Runs Fast choose to defend camp. Choose to fight. That his choice is honor. You know take that from him by feeling guilty. You honor him by living free. By being worth saving. You understand? Bertie's throat was too tight to speak. She nodded. That night, Running Wolf called a council meeting. The question was simple. Should they send Bertie away? To remove the target from the camp? The debate was heated. Some argued she brought danger. Others argued that sending her away would mean Blackwood won, that threats and violence could dictate tribal decisions. In the end, Pretty Shield stood and spoke. Running Wolf translated for Bertie. She says, "We adopted Redbird Woman. That means she's ours to protect, no matter the cost. If we give her up when violence comes, what message does that send? That we can be frightened into abandoning our own? That our word means nothing? That our adoption ceremony was just words with no weight? I say no. We keep her. We protect her. And anyone who tries to take her learns what happens when you threaten Crow family." The council voted. Bertie would stay. 2 days later, news came from Fort Ellis. Captain Howard had arrested Silas Blackwood. The evidence was damning. Hired guns had testified in exchange for reduced sentences, confirming that Blackwood had paid them to retrieve Bertie by any means necessary. One still had the $50 in gold Blackwood had given as down payment. Blackwood was in chains, awaiting trial for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, inciting violence, and murder, since Run's fast had died in an attack he'd ordered. Judge Carver had resigned and left the territory rather than face investigation into his bribe-taking. Thomas O'Connor had sold what little was left of his homestead and moved his family to Oregon. And Bertie, for the first time since she'd arrived in America, could breathe without waiting for the next blow to fall. But the cost weighed on her. Run's fast grave was a daily reminder. White Deer's grief was a sound that never quite left the camp. "How do you live with it?" she asked Running Wolf one evening. "Knowing people died because of you, because of your choices." He was quiet for a long time, watching the fire. "You don't live with it easily," he said finally. "My sister, Bright Morning, I think of her every day. I wonder if she's alive somewhere, suffering. If I could have tracked better, looked longer, found her, that weight doesn't go away. But you can't let it make you small. You can't let it convince you that you should have just accepted slavery, accepted being property, because then at least no one would get hurt." He looked at her. "Run's fast and die, so you could spend your life feeling guilty. He died defending the principle that people aren't property. That matters. That means something. You honor him by living fully, by being free, by never letting anyone own you again. That's how you carry the weight." Bertie nodded, understanding even if the understanding didn't make the grief lighter. The night before Blackwood's trial, Medicine Song Woman performed a ceremony. She painted Bertie's face with clay and ash, spoke prayers in Crow, and gave her a medicine bundle, a small leather pouch containing sacred items. "For protection," the old woman said, "and for remembering who you are. Not property, not thing to be bought. A person, with family, with name, with place in the world. When you forget, you open this, you remember." Inside the pouch, a small feather from a red bird, a stone from a creek where she'd first entered Crow territory, a bead from Pretty Shield's wedding dress, a snippet of hair from Little Hawk's first cutting, and a tiny carving of a horse that Running Wolf had made. Proof that she belonged. Proof that she was home. The trial that will determine Blackwood's fate and Bertie's future is about to begin. Will justice finally be served, or will corruption win again? The final chapter brings everything to a stunning conclusion. Subscribe to Awesome Stories and hit that bell. You don't want to miss the epic ending of this true-to-history drama. The trial of Silas Blackwood took place in the territorial courthouse in Benson Creek, 3 months after the raid on the Crow camp. The courthouse was the largest building in town, made of milled lumber shipped from the east at great expense, a monument to white authority in a territory where authority was usually measured in guns and gold. Today it was packed to capacity. On one side, Blackwood supporters, the landowners and businessmen who'd grown wealthy on the same practices he'd used, buying up debt, foreclosing on homesteads, treating people as property when the law allowed it. On the other, settlers who'd been cheated by Blackwood, Crow people who'd come to witness, and curious townspeople who sensed they were watching something that would be talked about for years. Bertie sat in the front row with Running Wolf, Medicine Song Woman, and Pretty Shield. She wore her doeskin dress with the beadwork Pretty Shield had spent weeks on, red birds in flight across the shoulders. Her hair was braided Crow style. She was no longer trying to look white to be taken seriously. She'd learned that looking like who she was, Red Bird Woman of the Absolute, was power enough. The judge was new, brought in from Helena specifically because every local judge was either bought by Blackwood or too intimidated to rule against him. His name was Edmund Whitaker, a severe-looking man in his 60s with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. Captain Howard was there as well, in uniform, representing the Army's interest in maintaining peace and treaty law. And Silas Blackwood sat at the defendant's table in chains, his expensive suit rumpled, his face haggard. 3 months in a cell had worn him down. Or maybe it was a realization that for the first time in his life, money wasn't going to save him. His new lawyer, the third one, the previous 2 having quietly withdrawn, was a young man from Virginia named Matthews who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. The prosecutor was a federal attorney named Elizabeth Ashford, sent from Washington specifically for this case. She was the first female attorney Bertie had ever seen, a tall woman with iron gray hair and a voice that could cut glass. "Your Honor," Ashford began, "the United States will prove that Silas Blackwood, through a pattern of bribery, coercion, and intimidation, attempted to purchase a 15-year-old child for purposes of forced marriage, in violation of the 13th Amendment. When his illegal contract was invalidated by military authority, he hired armed men to kidnap the child from a sovereign Crow Nation camp, resulting in an act of war that left 1 Crow warrior dead and 3 wounded. We will show that Blackwood's actions represent the worst excesses of frontier lawlessness and must be punished to the full extent of federal law." Matthews stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence of all charges. The marriage contract was legal under territorial law at the time it was signed. The hired men acted independently without his knowledge or consent. Mr. Blackwood is a respectable businessman being persecuted for exercising his legal rights." "His legal rights?" Ashford interrupted. "To purchase a human being? To enter into a marriage contract with the proper guardian's consent. Did the child consent? Territorial law doesn't require. Federal law does. The 13th Amendment is very clear. No person shall be held in involuntary servitude. Involuntary means without consent. That's the law of the land, Mr. Matthews, regardless of what territorial law may have permitted before." Judge Whitaker raised a hand. "Counselors, save your arguments for testimony. Ms. Ashford, call your first witness." The United States calls Bridget O'Connor, also known as Redbird Woman. Bertie walked to the witness stand on legs that only shook a little. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Ashford approached. "Miss O'Connor, please tell the court what happened on the day of July 14th, 1867. Bertie told it all. The sod house, the dress, the crossroads, Blackwood's cold eyes, the papers and the gold, Running Wolf's intervention. Every detail, clean and clear." When she finished, Ashford asked, "Did you at any time consent to marry Silas Blackwood?" "No, ma'am." "Did anyone ask if you consented?" "No, ma'am." "If the Crow warriors had not intervened, what would have happened?" "I would have been forced to go with Mr. Blackwood. My uncle had already said he would make me go if I refused. I would have become his property, like the 2 other women he keeps locked on his ranch." Matthews objected. "Speculation and hearsay." "Not speculation," Ashford said. "We have testimony from both women, which the court will hear shortly. But first, Miss O'Connor, how did you come to be adopted by the Crow Nation?" Bertie explained the adoption ceremony, the legal recognition by Captain Howard, the choice she'd made to become absolute. "And do you regret that choice?" Ashford asked. "No, ma'am. The Crow gave me what my own family wouldn't. Protection, education, and the right to choose my own life." Ashford returned to her table and picked up a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence the sworn statements of 2 women currently residing on Mr. Blackwood's ranch, Anna Kowalski, age 23, and Susan Hart, age 19. Both women state that they were purchased through similar arrangements, debt forgiveness in exchange for marriage contracts signed by male relatives without the women's consent. Both state that they are forbidden to leave the ranch, that they are treated as servants rather than wives, and that they have been threatened with violence if they attempt to escape or speak to authorities." Matthews shot to his feet. "Objection! These women are not credible witnesses. They're mentally disturbed, clearly. They're prisoners," Ashford said flatly, "held in involuntary servitude on your client's property, which is slavery, Mr. Matthews, which has been illegal since 1865. The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitaker banged his gavel repeatedly before order was restored. The trial continued for 3 days. Thomas O'Connor testified, shamefaced, admitting he'd sold his niece and would force her to go through with it. Father O'Malley testified about the bribe he'd accepted to sign the papers. The surviving hired guns testified about being paid by Blackwood to retrieve Bertie from Crow Camp. Running Wolf testified about the raid, about Run's fast death, about defending his family from armed attackers. Captain Howard testified about finding the adoption legally sound and about arresting Blackwood. And finally, Anna and Susan testified. They came to court under Army protection, pale and shaking, but determined. They told their stories. Polish immigrant, Irish orphan, both sold by desperate relatives. Both imprisoned on Blackwood's ranch for years. When Susan Hart described being locked in a room for 3 days without food because she'd spoken to a traveling preacher, Bertie watched several jury members' faces harden. Blackwood's defense was simple. He'd acted within territorial law. The women were lying. He'd never ordered the raid. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Matthews knew it. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all charges. Judge Whitaker sentenced Blackwood to 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, inciting violence, and violations of the 13th Amendment. Additionally, his property was seized to pay restitution to the Crow Nation for the raid, and to Anna and Susan for years of unpaid labor. When the sentence was read, Blackwood finally broke. "This is an outrage. You can't do this to me. I'm a landowner, a businessman. I built this territory." "You built it," Whitaker said coldly, "on the backs of vulnerable people you treated as property. That ends today." Officers removed the prisoner. They dragged Blackwood away, still shouting. The courtroom emptied slowly. Bertie stood outside in the afternoon sun, feeling like she'd witnessed something impossible. Justice, actual justice, in a system designed to favor men like Blackwood. Captain Howard approached. "Miss O'Connor, or should I say Redbird woman?" "Either. Both. I'm getting used to being two things at once." "How does it feel to have one?" Bertie considered. "Strange. I keep waiting for someone to say it was a mistake, that the ruling is overturned, that I have to go back." She looked up at him. "Does it stick?" "The sentence. It sticks. Blackwood's going to federal prison. His property is being liquidated. And you," Howard smiled slightly, "you're free. Legally, officially, permanently. You're a member of the Crow Nation with all rights and protections that entails. No one can take that from you." Running Wolf joined them. "Captain, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for trusting the process. I know it wasn't easy after everything." "No," Running Wolf agreed. "It wasn't, but you honored your word. That matters." They stood together in silence for a moment. A Crow warrior, a U.S. Army captain, an Irish girl who belonged to both worlds and neither. "What will you do now?" Howard asked Bertie. "Go home," she said simply. "To the camp. To my family. And after that," she smiled, "learn. Grow. Maybe one day help other girls who are being sold. I know English and Crow now. I know white law and tribal law. I can stand in the middle and translate. That's worth something, isn't it?" "That's worth everything," Howard said. 6 months later, the Crow camp had moved to Winter Grounds, a sheltered valley with good water and protection from the worst winds. Bertie, Redbird woman, stood outside Medicine Song Woman's lodge, grinding biscuit root into flour, her hands strong and sure with practice. She was 16 now. She wore her hair in Crow braids woven with red cloth. She could speak Crow fluently and read English better than most settlers. She could tan a hide, track a deer, identify 50 medicinal plants, and argue treaty law with lawyers. She was teaching English to Crow children in exchange for learning traditional medicine from Medicine Song Woman. She was part of the council discussions about how to handle increasing white encroachment. She was learning to be a bridge between worlds. She'd received one letter from her Aunt Margaret. It was brief, apologetic, and distant. Margaret wrote that they'd settled in Oregon, that the children were well, that Thomas drank heavily and rarely spoke, that they thought of her and hoped she was safe. Bertie had written back, carefully, saying she was well and had found a home. She didn't invite them to visit. Some wounds healed better with distance. Anna and Susan had used their restitution money to buy a small bakery in Benson Creek. They'd sent Bertie a letter thanking her for testifying and inviting her to visit any time. She'd gone once, and they cried together. 3 women who'd survived being sold and come out the other side. Little Hawk appeared at her elbow. "Redbird woman, Grandmother says you need more firewood. Tell Grandmother I'll get it after I finish this." "She says now." He grinned. She also says you're getting stubborn like a real, absolute woman. Bertie laughed and ruffled his hair. Then I'd better get the firewood. She walked to the woodpile, passing families preparing evening meals, children playing, elders sitting in the last of the sun's warmth. This was her tribe now, her people, her home. She thought sometimes of her parents, buried in Irish soil half a world away. She hoped they'd be proud of who she'd become. She hoped they'd understand that she'd survived by finding a new family when the old one failed her. Running Wolf approached, carrying fresh-killed rabbits from a successful hunt. Red Bird Woman. Pretty Shield wants to know if you can help her with the new baby's cradle board tonight. She says your beadwork is better than hers. She's lying to make me feel useful, but I'll help anyway. He smiled. That's what family does. Yes, Bertie agreed, looking around at the camp, at the mountains beyond, at the life she'd built from the broken pieces of the one she'd lost. That's what family does. She'd come to America an orphan, alone and afraid. She'd been sold like property, passed around like a deed. She'd run, been found, been protected, been adopted, and now she stood between two worlds, belonging to both, valued by both, needed by both, not because of her blood, not because of her birth, but because of her choice. And that choice had made her free. Thank you for following Bertie's incredible journey from being sold by her own family to finding freedom and justice with the Crow Nation. If this historical drama moved you, like this video, subscribe to Awesome Stories and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of survival and hope. What historical story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions in the comments. Until next time, remember, no one can own your spirit. You decide who you are and where you belong.